All right. Actually, I had to wait till after Davude's live because it was just so good. um, but actually, there are things that I really wanted to talk about today. So I think anybody that was able to watch Davude's live stream and then watch mine, I think you guys will have a treat. But uh, anyways, there is a phrase that has come to my mind that I think is worth uh, dissecting. That is worth trying to figure out exactly what do we mean when we say. I think we hear this sentiment all the time. Um, this person makes me feel seen. This person, it's as if they really know me. It's as if they recognize me. So before I go into this tangent, what I've been wanting to tackle is that when I'm reading Kojeve, the introduction of Hegel, Kojeve, through his introduction, through his interpretation of Hegel, he says something very captivating to me. That our sole desire is to be recognized, right? This desire to be recognized is, um, in essence, to be seen, right? To go from a given being and to really explain what given being is, it would be to say this, that let's use Aristotle's definition, right? That we are just rational animals. This is our given state. Notice how Aristotle doesn't say human being. At least this is my interpretation of Aristotle, right? Aristotle says that we are rational animals, but he doesn't say human being. Uh, and my interpretation of this, or my play on this interpretation, is that I would say that this is genius that Aristotle says this, because that implies, like Kojeve implies, that it actually takes work to be a human being. It actually takes work to become recognized as a human being. Recognition is the base of the desire. Yeah, I mean, so thank you, Samuel Barnes, for bringing that up. So I like this element of playing with, is this true, right? As I'm reading Kojève, I'm going, okay, is this necessarily true? And I thought about my own experiences, right? And the first thing that I thought about is like, what's that famous saying? Like, I fell in love at first sight, right? This idea of like, I fell in love at first sight. But if we dissect this experience, why is the element of falling in love at first sight so painful? Um, Assuming it's one-sided, let's assume that it's one-sided. Why is it painful? Because obviously you recognize the other person. Actually, the whole world melts right into the background, and you just see this beautiful woman at the cafe, right? You recognize her, right? You recognize her as this woman, and everything else just melts, dissipates. All you see is this woman, so you recognize her. But why is it painful? It's painful, or at least you come to the conclusion that it ends up being painful, because in the end, what you really want is her to recognize you. Because if she never recognizes you, you simply don't exist, right? Um, I know that in our daily experiences, we don't really dissect this experience. But when we dissect this experience, it actually reveals why it's so painful. It's not because we recognize this person all of a sudden. It's actually because we desire so desperately to be seen by the other. Um, and because if not, it's like I don't exist, right? I mean, and to kind of go further, right? When someone doesn't recognize you, the person that you really want to recognize you, um, nobody else matters. Your family could recognize you, your mother recognizes you, but these are all givens. right? It doesn't matter how much my mommy tells me that she loves me. If the woman that I am completely uh, head over heels for doesn't acknowledge me, then it doesn't matter if mommy loves me. It doesn't matter. Uh, and so what happens is that all these things melt into givens. It simply doesn't matter. And then but this revelation though is like you understand now that you really crave to be recognized. All, even though oftentimes we don't, as I would say, most normal people don't dissect this experience philosophically. They don't really tackle this experience. They just want the the woman to fall in love with them. But it's like, why do you want this person to recognize you? You don't know anything about them. um, and so but it ultimately does reveal that we crave to be recognized, and this is what makes us human, as Kojeve says. The desire to be recognized is what humanizes us. And once we are recognized, um, in our full value, um, then we're human. In Kojeve, through Kojeve's interpretation of Hegel, I make sure that you imply the interpretation of Hegel. I'm not going to repeat it every time, but just add that on there. Uh, so, but here's the thing. Here's the other challenge with this. It's not what I've noticed is that, and I'm not really sure if it's going to go into this in the phenomenology of spirits. I haven't. I'm still going through it through Cadell's class. But the thing that I'm starting to realize is that even if someone does recognize you, or all of a sudden begins to recognize you, it it vanishes. It it lapses into given again. It lapses into a given being. And to give you a more tangible example, I think about food, right? Think about food. When you're hungry, all of a sudden you really acknowledge the food that you want to eat, right? You want to eat this pear. Um, and so you go to the supermarket and you buy the pear. But let's say you actually don't eat the pear and you save it for later. Um, what ends up happening is that you recognize the pear enough to pick it out and bring it to your house with you. But then it elapses into a given because soon you will forget about it. Soon you'll no longer recognize the pear until once again you start thinking about what you want to eat in the morning or for breakfast or something like that. So what I'm trying to say is that I think a lot of our personal relationships are just like this. Once I acknowledge that we're in a relationship, it's like, yes, it's recognized, but the moment it's recognized, in my opinion, it lapses into given being, right? And this is the danger. And you see this in personal relationships where people get very comfortable. Um, you hear statements like, "Oh, she'll never leave me," or "He'll never leave me because, so and so," right? It's the danger of of just givens. It's the danger of givens, and this is what I notice in in relationships. Family is probably the fester of givens, right? It's like, why would you do this to me? I'm your brother, right? It's like a given. It's just like no explanation, just given. It's um and so there's like no work involved when a family functions in that way, because everyone's just going like, well, what are you doing? Like, we're family. uh and like, that's it. It's just like, we're family, but nobody. And that language is dangerous, because what happens is all we're doing against each other is just abusing the givens, just constantly abusing the givens against each other without attempting to recognize each other. uh, and so and so this is the this is the problem. And this is what I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, obviously, with the concept of what is a human relationship and everything, is that um, it seems right now from what I've been contemplating. It seems like actually that the whole premise that Kojeve brings up is that in order to be recognized, there is an intermediary, which is work. Work. But the problem with that is that work is so ambiguous, right? And he doesn't really dive into exactly what that work means. I mean, it's like you understand it. You're like, okay, it takes work to be recognized, so the other person could recognize you, and so on. But it's like, okay, how is that accomplished? What does that mean? Um, and if I take seriously what I already proposed, that the moment I recognize you, it also lapses into givens. And that means we have to constantly work to raise the given into recognition, constantly. But there is a prerequisite before that even goes into recognition, which is, as Kojève puts it, the fear of death. Um, Now, in Kojève's interpretation of Hegel, he brings a lot of tangible examples in terms of humans fighting wars, but um, at this point in time, really, most people are not fighting physical wars with each other. So there is a way to, but it is obvious. Oh, that's a little bit of a dangerous word, but I want to say that there are many examples in our lives where we experience a sort of metaphysical, I mean, not metaphysical, metaphorical war, a metaphorical life or death kind of situation. The thing is, what is that? How do we put ourselves in that situation so that we are actually fighting for recognition, and that we don't, uh, elapse into given being? But in my opinion, it elapses back into given being, and that's why work must continuously exist. I was listening to a lecture from Stephen Holgate, and this is why I came up with the idea that it is possible the moment that we recognize a person, it lapses into given being. That for that moment, I do recognize you as human being, and then it vanishes into given being. Um, and the reason for that contemplation is that when Stephen Holgate is giving his lecture on Hegel's Science of Logic, he says, okay, so Hegel is trying to think pure being. But Hegel says that to think pure being, if you think pure being, indeterminate being, you get pure nothingness. Um, that actually pure being vanishes into pure nothingness, the most radical kind of nothingness. And if you think pure nothingness, it vanishes into pure being. And so I thought about this, and I said a definitely a cuss word. And I was like, dang, wow. I think that is actually what happens when we begin to also recognize each other. That it also instantly vanishes. That the moment I actually do recognize you as a human being, it vanishes into given being. Why? Because we must always be becoming. And like the Stephen Holgate said in his lecture, he's like, actually, it is because it's becoming, right? The whole vanishing between pure nothing, pure being. He said this vanishing, it's not like some trying to transition. He said it's immediate. He goes, it's becoming. And so I really felt, I really felt that predicament. And I thought, yes, that's what it must be. Um, it has to be work, and it has to be becoming. And so recognition, um, my suspicion is that rhymes, doesn't it? My recognition, my suspicion. Better drop lines on this channel. um, but anyways, yeah, my suspicion is that recognition elapses back into given, and hence the reason why becoming is important, um, and work is important. Um, and I guess the danger is never being in a static given, and abusing our givens against each other. Um, there's something else I want to tie in, but I feel like it's a little too complex. But it makes me think of there's a psychoanalyst that came up with the idea of object relations theory, where actually um the child does not recognize the mother. Actually, the child only acknowledges the breast, right? So there is this interesting thing that we could dive into where uh, you only identify partial objects, you only recognize partial objects. Um, and I feel like there's something to tie in there with that, um, for a development theory of human relationships. But anyways, I want to, uh, I think that's really it, that I want to just stop there, because this is really what I wanted to talk about, and and this aspect of being seen, and seen as being. So, um, all right, you guys take care.